The king was in a mood. And when the king is in a mood, everybody's afraid. What should we do? Well, this wasn't the first time this king had been in a mood. And so his attendants knew exactly what to do. Because every time they called someone to play the harp, it would soothe the king, his mood would change. And when the king's happy, everyone's happy. And so they called for the harp player to come. And he came. And he played, and sure enough, the king's mood began to change. This had happened many times, but this particular time was different. Because the king himself was full of fear. And as he looked at the harp player, he thought to himself, he's trying to take my throne. And so I'm going to pin him to the wall with my spear. And so King Saul took his spear and hurled it at David, the harp player, narrowly missing David. Now you think, after this episode, the harp player that we know as David probably wouldn't want to play for the king anymore. It's a tough audience, right? And yet, another day came. King Saul had apologized. And David came in to play the harp once again to soothe the king because he was once again in a mood. Once again, the king decided, I'm going to end this. Full of fear and rage, grabbed his spear, threw it at David, missed again. That was the last time David played the harp for King Saul. And David fled. And there's a few more events in between where we're going to land today. And you can find those in 1 Samuel chapter 19, 20, and 21. But ultimately, David didn't just flee the king's palace over a series of events. It was confirmed in David's heart through his friend Jonathan, which happened to be the son of King Saul, that King Saul definitely was bent on taking his life. And so in fear, in great haste, David fled. He was in such a hurry that he didn't bring anything with him. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have any supplies. He didn't have food. He didn't even have a weapon. And so David went to the high priest and asked him for food. And all there was the bread of the presence, which was only for the priests, and the sword of Goliath, the giant that David had slain, was the only weapon that they had. And so they gave him that. And David was like, well, there is no better weapon than this. And they gave him the bread of presence, and he went on his way. But interestingly enough, David went straight to the king of the Philistines, which is interesting. And I think it's a picture of what fear does to us when it overtakes us. And so David went from King Saul, trying to kill him, to King Achish in the city of Gath, where Goliath had lived and probably had a few family members. And suddenly David comes to his senses and recognizes his danger and asks himself, what am I going to do? He's been captured by the Philistines now, because he went there, and they're bent on killing him. Of course. He's the champion of the enemy. He killed their champion. And so David decides to act like he's insane. And he starts drooling and ranting and raving. And it says the spittle was all through his beard. They take him before King Achish. King Achish looks at him and goes like, don't I have enough madmen in my court? Get him out of here. And so David was set free. So here's the bottom line. This is where we're going today. This is the statement that if you miss all the rest, take this one with you. If you don't take your fear to God, your fear will drive you away from God. This message, although it didn't start in the Psalms, is coming around now to the Psalms. And just a quick recap, because this is the lens we want to look at these Psalms through. The Psalms show us what relationship with God looks like and how you can have a close relationship. How many times you read a psalm and go like, wow, like I want to have a relationship with God like this psalmist does. And what should we expect? Well, this is the opportunity for us as a people of God in this church as we walk through these psalms to draw closer to Jesus, to learn how to relate to him and how to walk by faith in a broken world. Hope, encouragement, comfort, perspective, faith, and an invitation to draw close to God, who desires to be with us and actually wants to be close with you. And so the Psalms remind us of who God is and help us reorient our lives around him and his truth. And so here's the statement that we're kind of landing on each week. The Psalms' honesty and sometimes shocking rawness draw us into close relationship with God, where pretense can be abandoned and openness can be embraced. And so that's the kind of relationship that is modeled by the psalmists and how they teach us how to actually have that kind of relationship with God. So today, we're going to dive into Psalm 56. We're going to do the whole psalm. It's not a huge psalm. And then we're going to dive into it a little bit. We're going to show where Jesus is in this psalm. And then we're going to talk about how this psalm can impact you. Be gracious to me, O God, for man tramples on me. Context. The reason we told the story at the start, David wrote this psalm while he was in Gath, when the Philistines had captured him and he realized that he was in a tough position. And he cries out to God. So that's context. All day long, an attacker oppresses me. My enemies trample on me all day long, for many attack me proudly. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? All day long they injure my cause. Talking about actually twisting his words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They stir up strife, they lurk. They watch my steps. They have waited for my life. For their crime will they escape? In wrath, cast down the peoples, O God. You have kept count of my tossings. Put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Then my enemies will turn back in the day when I call. This I know, that God is for me. In God whose word I praise, in the Lord whose word I praise, in God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can man do to me? I must perform my vows to you, O God. I will render thank offerings to you. For you have delivered my soul from death, yes, my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of life. This is a great psalm, and the context brings this thing to life. So David fled from King Saul. We get this picture of him in such haste that he didn't have, in his mind, time to take it to God first. And what we have is him running right into the hands of his other greatest enemy. So if there are two enemies in David's life that are trying to kill him, one is King Saul, one is King Achish. And so it's interesting. I think it's a picture of what fear does to us. And just on our bottom line here, if you don't take your fear to God, your fear will drive you away from God. And I think this psalm gives us great comfort because that's what David did. He ran from Saul right to King Achish. And then he took it to God. And here's where the comfort lies, is that if you've made a mistake, and if you've ran into your fear, ultimately pushing you away from God, it is never too late. David did that too. And he wrote this psalm in the middle of it. And so let's dive in. So the first, I've just split it into three parts here. The first four verses I've just called help. Right? He's been taken. David's been captured by the Philistines. They are the greatest enemy of Israel. And they hate David because of what he's done. And so David begins this psalm by pleading for mercy from God. Be merciful or gracious. And the point, it's the very first words of this psalm showing us that David, I'm going to God. I'm going first. Like all of this stuff is going, I'm in trouble, help. And why is David asking for mercy? Well, his life is in peril. Like he is in danger. And he needs deliverance. And so horrible things, like he's kind of says, this is what's going on, God. We'll get to that in a second. But ultimately he's like, God, I need out. I need you to help me. I'm stuck. And I think possibly because of the context of this psalm, he's begging for mercy because he didn't do this right after King Saul was looking to kill him. And that's possible. I don't know if that's, for me, it's like definitely a possibility. And so David's opening colors how we should read the psalm and stands in stark contrast to what he's asking God to do to his enemies or his attackers, the people who are trampling on him and proudly attacking him. And so David wants mercy and deliverance for himself, and he wants judgment and retribution, and ultimately frustration that their schemes would fail for those who oppose him. And so why? Well, David builds a case here. He's getting trampled on. Like the imagery is awesome. Like it's amazing. It's like, yeah, that doesn't feel good. Just put yourself, poetry is supposed to evoke our imagination. So let's do that. Let's get your imaginations going. Just think of what it feels like to be trampled on. That does not feel good. All day long. You probably noticed that he said that numerous times in this text. It's to give us this idea that the attack on him is relentless. It has not stopped. It's continual. He's oppressed. He's attacked. So he's always saying these things. He's saying the same thing all in different ways. And ultimately, the proud, we know from the rest of Scripture that David is making a distinction between himself and his attackers. You see, the proud are not just the enemies of David by calling them proudly attacking. Now he's going like, Lord, they are enemies of you. And so David is afraid, so he affirms his trust in God. So after this initial kind of like, this is what's going on, God, this is why I need help. They're not just my enemies, they're your enemies. David then turns and shows, I'm with you. He takes his fear to God, affirms his trust in God and his word, and then aligns his perspective of the situation in light of who God is. When it says flesh there, it ultimately is, what can mere mortals do to me? What can they do in the face of this God that I serve and that I trust in? What can mere mortals do? And this ultimately is why he doesn't need to fear anymore. His eyes have shifted from his fear for his life and the opposition that's all around him, and he is focused on God. And he's declaring this. Remember, he is full of fear. And so he is declaring that I shall not fear because of who you are. I think it's great. So he's not denying that he's afraid, because it actually says it right in the text. He's afraid. But because he is making this declaration, because he is bringing his mind back to, I know who my God is, he says, I shall not fear. So we have the next section here is an appeal to God's justice, and this is from 5 to 11. And he begins by, if you go back to Psalm 1, he shows two ways. The first is the way of the wicked. And so in his appeal to God, he's telling God, they are walking in the way of the wicked. All day long, it's relentless. They injure my cause, meaning they twist my words and they have false accusations against me. Talking about their thoughts, evil, is the schemes that they are devising and plots and plans are meant to kill him. They wait for my life simply means they're hoping to trip me up in something I say so that they have a better excuse to kill me, which he's in front of the Philistines. So, I mean, they don't need a lot of ammo or a lot of evidence against him to kill him. Everybody knows who he is. They stir up strife. They lurk. They watch my steps. It's just this constant vigilance looking to trip him up in any way that they can because they want his life. They're full of hatred and violence. They want revenge. They know who David is, and they hate him. And so the call for deliverance from David is a question. Are they going to get away with it, Lord? For their crimes? Right? David is asking God. And then the call for judgment. Pour out your wrath. These aren't just people who are trying to hurt me. They're your enemies because they don't just hate me, they hate you. They are walking in the way of the wicked, which is those who oppose God. And so our second way is, of course, the opposite, right? In Psalm 1, it gives us two ways. And this is the way of the righteous. And ultimately, the way of the righteous is to remember in these types of situations who our God is. And so I think this is key. Like this part is really amazing. And so take this to heart. The first is he says that God keeps count of my tossings. Imagination, all right? You're in your bed, right? And you can't sleep because your mind will not stop. Maybe it's slander, accusations, worry, but you're full of fear. God sees that. David is confirming that God isn't blind. He's not just doesn't know. It's like, oh, what happened? Oh, it sucks to be you. Like, that's not our God, right? God sees. He sees every moment. He sees how it affects us. He sees our broken hearts. He sees the brokenness within us. He sees us wrestling and in pain. He sees us suffering. He sees our affliction. He sees you right to the very core of who you are. This is why we don't have to pretend with God. This is why we don't have to have fancy language for God to listen to us. He sees past all of that. He knows what's in the depth of your heart. And so you don't have to make a show to talk to God. You don't have to filter stuff. So when you go to God, make sure you don't make a mistake. That's more like King Saul. Right? God sees. He sees. Sees it all. And then David says he puts tears in a bottle, and there's a whole ancient tradition of what that means. But it's this idea of grieving with, of saving this, remembering, all of these things together. And ultimately, it's showing us that God cares. I mean, the imagery is wonderful, isn't it? The tears in a bottle. I mean, wow. But God cares. He doesn't just see it. He cares. He doesn't just care, he hurts with you. He goes through the suffering with you, not just beside you. He's suffering with you. This is the amazing thing about this amazing God, that he doesn't have to do that, and yet he does. And then David says, are they not in your book? Like, you have records of this, right? What does this show us? It shows us that, God knows. Like, he's the judge. There's an account. He's not going to forget. God remembers. He knows. So he sees. He sees you. He cares and hurts with you. He remembers. He doesn't forget these things. And it comes down to this statement, which I think is like core to this entire psalm. God is for me. He sees me. He cares and hurts with me. He remembers. But the best of all, he is for me. And with that type of view, with that type of knowledge, this I know, that God is for me. What can man do to me? Like, what are they going to do? And so David doubles down on his statement, actually about 4 times. In God I trust. I shall not be afraid. And our final section, just entitled, it's Confidence in God's Deliverance, the last 2 verses here. Because if God is for him, David sees his deliverance as good as done. He has delivered my soul from death. He's planning his thank offerings, which was a celebration at the time, and vows and thanks offerings were that's what you did when you had answered prayer. So he's already preparing it because he's confident that God is going to deliver him, that God ultimately is going to take him from this hopeless situation because of the promise that had been given to David that God that David would be king. So David, it's not just a blind kind of, no, God had spoken to David and had promised him that he would be king. And even in that, like even with that really clear promise from God, like David's afraid. He's afraid for his life because that's us. That's humanity. What fear does to us. So this whole psalm he's just realigning it all. Then this confidence that, he's going to deliver me because this is who he is. Because ultimately God is with me and he is for me. That's the picture that we see in this psalm. And then David's vision of the future, I will walk in the light of life. Meaning, I think it's the idea of God's face shining on him in the priestly blessing, that God watches over the way of the righteous, and that David will be able to walk in the awareness of God's presence in his life. If you don't take your fear to God, your fear will drive you away from God. The best example we have in Scripture of this is Jesus. And so this is where we see Jesus in this psalm. Very similar to David going from one enemy to another, we see Jesus in the crucifixion narrative going from one enemy, Herod, to another enemy, a Roman, Pilate, the Roman governor, and the horrible mistreatment by both. Ultimately, Pilate kind of washing his hands of all this stuff, but he gave Jesus over to the people to be crucified. We see that the religious leaders, so David's struggle with all of the twisted words and the relentless attack. Well, Jesus faced this. Like his entire ministry career, Jesus faced this. It was 3 years that he was with his disciples that his ministry went public. And it didn't take very long. We get this picture that the opposition came very quickly in Jesus' ministry, continually trying to trap him. They were watching his every move, right? The religious leaders, looking for a chance to discredit him, and ultimately, we find out that they were looking for a chance to kill him. I mean, this is expressed in the psalm perfectly. This is what Jesus went through. Relentlessly, like it was all day long. It's like every chapter in the Gospels, it seems like Jesus is confronted by one of the religious groups. So it's this idea of this all day long. They lurked, right? They sent spies. We know that they sent spies into Jesus' disciples because they were looking to kill him. They plotted, they schemed, they stirred up strife, they slandered, they falsely accused him, they twisted his words. This is what Jesus went through. For me, the psalm, this is screams out of like, whoa. He did all this. Jesus was the perfect example of the statement, in God I trust, throughout his entire ministry. And then we see it in the garden just before his crucifixion. What does Jesus do with his fear? He goes to the garden, he goes to his Father and pours out his heart to his Father. If there's any other way. 3 times. Then realigns, and God, I can imagine him thinking of this psalm going like, in you, Father, I trust. And ultimately giving his life over to the Father to do as he would. And then even on the cross, right at the end, looking up to heaven, into your hands I give my spirit. The perfect picture. Like, just think of what Jesus went through. Should he not be afraid? Oh my goodness. I'm like, wow. How did he do that? He did it for us because of his great love for us. And he was committed to doing the Father's will. All right, so this psalm has obviously already impacted us, but let's spell it out a little bit more. Firstly, what do you do with your fear? Where do you go? What is your first move? I think every single one of us at this moment can think of a fear. And the psalm is giving us a pathway in how to deal with our fear. Because if you don't take your fear to God, your fear will drive you away from God. It'll drive you into something else. I mean, we see it all through our culture, do we not? Full of fear, fear everywhere, all around us and in us. We don't know what's true. We don't know what's going on. We're susceptible to all kinds of conspiracies, and we're like, oh, that's what fear does to us. David's giving us a different way to deal with our fear. And the antidote to fear is to give it to God. For a long time, I prayed that God would take things from me until I was talking to somebody and they were like, maybe you should give it to him instead. And I was like, whoa, it's so simple. And yet I'm like, what? That's brilliant. Yeah. And so I switched. I'm like, God, take this or take that. I'm like, I give you this. I give you this. We do that with our fear. I give you my fear. Lord, I'm afraid. So I give you my fear. I know that you are with me. I know that God is for me. What can mere mortals do to me in the face of this incredible God that I've given my life to? The antidote to fear is to give it to God, remembering who he is and what he has done, and then to declare, in God I trust. That's what we do with our fear. And so what happens? There's a perspective shift here that enables us to actually ask the question to ourselves, what's the worst that can happen? Like, seriously, my life is in God's hands. What can mere mortals do to me? What can man do to me? Secondly, what we can take away, how this psalm can impact us, is Jesus sees. Jesus knows what you're going through. He knows. He sees your pain. He's putting your tears in a bottle. This is awesome. He's watching you toss and turn on your bed. He is suffering with you. And he's not forgetting. He knows. He's a God of justice. He knows. So Jesus sees what is being done to you. He cares deeply about your affliction and suffers with you. He remembers your suffering, and he knows what you're going through because he went through it too. This is what the writer of Hebrews says in Hebrews chapter 4. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who ascended to heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith that we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive what? Mercy, to find grace to help us when? In our time of need. Isn't that awesome? He knows. He sees. He remembers. He cares. He hurts with you. And he can empathize. He knows exactly what you're going through because he went through it too. And finally, this is where we have to land. God is with you. In the end, it is this statement that stands out above the rest. It is the anchor point for your trust in God and the assurance of his presence in your life. It shifts our eyes away from our fear onto the one who holds the entire universe in his hand. Okay? Imagery. Imaginations. He holds the entire universe in his hand. One. There you go. How big is the universe? How big is God? How big is your fear? If God is small, your fear will be bigger. That's why David paints the picture of this in the face of mere mortals. What do I have to be afraid about? I worship this God. When your God is big and good, and he cares, and he sees, and he remembers, and he's with you, what can mere man do to me? Is this God that you serve big enough to hold the universe in one hand? That's a big God. And it sure puts into perspective how big my fear actually is. If you don't take your fear to God, your fear will drive you away from God.